5 years ago, I decided to change careers. I had done this sort of thing plenty of times, but never had I gone into a sector of the government so secretive that even the agency name was classified. I believe that my experiences with the first case are too important not to share. I arrived at a high-rise building and took the elevator up. The office where I was supposed to start my first day was some random room in a residential apartment. I studied my handler in detail. No introductions. There was a scant amount of information shared in this line of work, meaning if I wanted to satisfy my curiosity outside of what I needed to do my job, I needed to infer it on my own. What I could see was a man that stunk of cigarette smoke, covered up with an expensive cologne, who had not bothered to shave in a day or two. One could hardly see him as the senior-ranking government employee that he was. He motioned for me to sit with him as he looked through images on a monitor to determine what our first field case would be. Pictures had been filtered through a cutting-edge machine learning program that could filter through the millions of social media posts that appeared online looking for something suspicious. "Aha!" He smiled, stopping on a picture. He spoke in a thick Russian accent. "Good for first case. See anything?" It looked like the image of a normal family posting a picture of their lazy afternoon. A wife, a husband, and 2 children who looked to be in high school hanging out in their bedroom messing about on the karaoke machine. Nothing seemed immediately out of place, but using my human micro-expression training, I could notice tired, deadened eyes, smiles that did not quite reach all the way up the face, confusion. "Yes, I do," I answered, hoping for more clarification. "Good. Stay back and watch. Learn more." The assignment was in a neighboring state. A half a day's drive was made in silence as I tried in futility to pry words out of my so-called instructor's mouth. I was used to having more detailed briefings, but I didn't want to seem incompetent. The opportunity to work for them, to know what happens behind the veil, was much too important. We arrived at their address. It was the middle of the day on a Saturday, and they lived in a lovely apartment complex with plenty of mighty oaks covering the street on the way in. I made a note that their gray Toyota RAV4 was parked on the street, details my handler seemed to care little about as he marched directly toward their door. When he arrived, he rapped on the screen door impatiently, ringing the doorbell a few times for good measure. I traced the outline of my sidearm underneath my arm. The door behind the screen door opened, and the curious face of the husband popped up behind it. Out of habit, I pulled out my wallet with my badge in it, ready to say the usual spiel, but I bit my tongue at the last minute. I was supposed to learn from my handler. "Hey!" He greeted them enthusiastically with what little English he had. He opened the door and gave the husband a warm hug, walking into the apartment. "We step in now," he stated matter-of-factly. "Oh, Mike, what a surprise," the husband said. "Please, come on in. We made cookies." I didn't know much about my handler, but I knew for a fact that he wasn't called Mike. Additionally, given the mask we wore covering our nose and mouth, even if they did know each other, he wasn't recognizable. "Hello, Mike," the wife chimed, coming out of the kitchen in oven mitts. She had just removed the ceramic Christmas tree cookie dish from the oven on which they had been baking cookies. The husband gestured at us to make ourselves comfortable and sat down at the table by himself, where he proceeded to start picking at the cookies that had just come out of the oven. The 2 children sat side by side on the couch, transfixed by the television that was stuck on the ad channel, selling overpriced jewelry to the first caller. The bedrooms were down the hall past the living room. My handler walked in through the carpet floor, quickly losing interest in the first open door when he realized it was the kids' room. The second door was the master bedroom. It was the exact room on the social media post from before, with the karaoke machine still set up on the left side of the room. The handler stopped and pulled out a stick of incense from his inner jacket pocket. "Watch," he said to me. I nodded, busy blocking the wife from coming closer. Us walking back seemed to have caught her interest, though she seemed neither perturbed nor upset that my outstretched arm was preventing her from wandering into the bedroom. The sunlight came in from the window like a pillar, illuminating the grains of smoke that rolled off the stick of incense like dust. He carefully observed the changes in the way the smoke flowed in the room, focusing hard on how it swirled. Having come to some conclusion, he put out the stick with his fingers and handed it to me. With a smooth motion, his hand went to the small of his back, where he pulled out a double-barreled shotgun, sawed off to be short enough to be stuffed back in his pants. He pointed it at the ugly Victorian wardrobe in the corner of the room and fired, the ensuing boom setting off several car alarms downstairs. The shock seemed to knock the mother out of her reverie. Alarm crept into her face. "What? Why'd you shoot my—" It was at that moment that the wardrobe started to bleed, and then it started to scream. Corners lifting, seams separating, legs rattling as thin, wiry appendages started to creep out, clawing at the air with desperation as the thing struggled to breathe with a lung that had so obviously popped. The large hole blown open by the gun showed us that there was no splintering of wood. Like the skin of an octopus, the textures and colors had all been an illusion, as the sounds of flesh slapping drywall resonated in our ears. And the scream, the unearthly scream like a cat being torn apart by coyotes, as the thing wailed in fury and terror, sputtering out into soft gasps for air as its hair-like appendages, tipped by wispy hands, eventually drooped down. Its whole body slumped over as I witnessed what a wardrobe might look like if one had melted. My wardrobe! The adrenaline in the mother mixed with her confusion as she began to realize she didn't quite understand what was going on. "Wardrobe fine. Right there." My handler nonchalantly pointed at the right wall. There it was, the same ugly Victorian wardrobe, seemingly unperturbed by the unceremonious execution of its brother. How did I not notice that the exact same piece of distinctive furniture was arranged in the same room? Off as it was, illuminated by the yellow lamp beside it, with identical crude brushstrokes of a family trying to reupholster it with just DIY videos adorning its side. She looked like she had more questions, but my handler was already on the phone, telling the workers that were on the way to move in and to cancel the 911 dispatches that had just been made. Soon, a swarm of forensic workers were on site, spraying away the stain on the wall and carrying away the corpse for autopsy. Utmost care was taken to preserve the bits of the body that were there, and to pick up every little piece to store in formaldehyde jars. Medics sat with each member of the family, testing their pupillary reflex and showing them cards with pictures on them. I watched them try to read them out, finding it fascinating how they managed to be a little off every time. Pomegranates became apples, ladders became stairs, coyotes became dogs, and so forth. "What is it? What does it do?" I asked my handler. He shrugged. "My guess is like cockroach." He laughed heartily. I learned from chatting with the medics that whatever gas-based hypnosis the creatures used eventually caused brain issues. Beyond that, no abnormalities from any of the family members. So why did it want to hide amongst people's furniture? When I finally made it home for the day, I wanted to collapse, but manic paranoia kept me up. Under the television was the glass cabinet that held an album. Years of photos stretching all the way back since before I was born until the death of Kodak lay within that album. I flipped through the old photos and felt my heart chill as I saw the same 2 nightstands on either side of my dad's bed. Me and who I assumed was a neighbor's kid were playing hide-and-seek, and my dad had snapped a picture on a summer's afternoon showing how poor our hiding spots were. On either side of the bed was the same piece of furniture, a generic IKEA nightstand. Could I be? No. IKEA sells 1,000,000 of these. Besides, this looked natural, like it was arranged this way on purpose. Don't be stupid. But as I stared closer, I could see the carving I made when my little vandal self found my father's Swiss Army knife. I had scratched a little star shape on the corner of the stand, and almost hidden on the other side was the corner of that same scratch, too identical for a child to have made independently. Completely identical. My father died before I got into high school from Alzheimer's. My whole childhood seemed like a blur from before I ended up in the foster system. What had it wanted? Check your houses. Check your friends. Check your parents and your grandparents. Whatever it is these things want, we need to stop it. And I don't think we're doing enough.